When Marcus asked me to be his emergency contact, I thought it was just paperwork. I never imagined I'd be the one standing in his hospital room on his wedding day, while his new wife sobbed in the hallway, and doctors asked me to make life-or-death decisions about her husband. Before we dive into this wild story, hit that like button if you've ever been put in an impossible situation by someone else's choices. And stick around because this gets crazier than you think. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. My name is Maya, and 3 years ago I made what seemed like the most innocent decision of my life. I was 25, working my first real job in corporate HR, trying to be the dependable friend everyone could count on. Marcus had been my college buddy for years, one of those solid friendships where we could go months without talking and pick up right where we left off. He'd moved to my city for work, and honestly, he seemed a little lost. No family nearby, hadn't made many friends yet, just grinding away at his marketing job, and trying to figure out adult life like the rest of us. So when he asked if I'd be his emergency contact for his company insurance, it felt like such a small thing. Just a name on a form, right? He said his parents lived 3 states away, and we were close enough that it made sense. I signed the papers without thinking twice about it. Fast forward 3 years, and I'm watching Marcus marry the woman of his dreams on a perfect Saturday afternoon in September. Jennifer was everything you'd picture when you think of the ideal bride. Stunning, confident, the kind of woman who looked like she belonged in wedding magazines. She had this way of lighting up every room she walked into, and Marcus was absolutely smitten. They'd been dating for what felt like a whirlwind romance, and honestly, I was happy for him. He deserved love after being alone for so long. The wedding was beautiful, one of those outdoor ceremonies by the lake with string lights and flowers everywhere. I sat in the back with some other college friends, clapping and cheering when they kissed, thinking about how far we'd all come since our messy 20s. Marcus looked nervous but happy, the way grooms are supposed to look. Jennifer was radiant, posing for what seemed like hundreds of photos, making sure every moment was captured perfectly for her social media. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception while the happy couple went off to take more photos by the water. The sun was setting, the photographer wanted those golden hour shots, and Jennifer was determined to get the perfect images for her Instagram. I was sitting at my table, eating cake and catching up with old friends, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end changed everything. "Is this Maya Johnson? You're listed as the emergency contact for Marcus Thompson." My stomach dropped. The woman's voice was professional but urgent, the kind of tone that immediately tells you something terrible has happened. She was calling from the hospital. There had been an accident. Marcus was unconscious. They needed me to come immediately. I remember the drive to the hospital feeling like it took forever, and no time at all. My mind was racing. Was Jennifer okay? How bad was Marcus hurt? Why were they calling me instead of his new wife? I kept thinking there had to be some mistake, that surely Jennifer was the one they really needed to talk to. When I rushed into the emergency room, still in my wedding guest dress and uncomfortable heels, I saw Jennifer in the waiting area. She was crying, her perfect wedding makeup streaked down her cheeks, her beautiful dress torn at the shoulder. She looked up when she saw me, confusion and relief mixing on her face. "Maya? What are you doing here? Did someone call you too?" she asked, wiping her eyes. Before I could answer, a doctor approached us. Middle-aged, tired-looking, the kind of expression that comes from delivering bad news too many times. He looked directly at me and said, "Ms. Johnson? We need to speak with you about Mr. Thompson's condition." Jennifer stood up immediately. "I'm his wife. We just got married today. Whatever you need to tell someone, you tell me." The doctor glanced at his clipboard, then back at me. "I understand this is complicated, but Ms. Johnson is listed as his emergency contact and healthcare proxy. We can only discuss his medical information with her." The look on Jennifer's face was something I'll never forget. Pure shock, like someone had just told her the sky was green. She turned to me with this expression of complete bewilderment. Emergency contact? Maya, what is he talking about? That's when the real nightmare began. The doctor explained that Marcus had been driving when their car hit a patch of wet leaves and skidded off the road into a tree. Jennifer had been wearing her seatbelt and only had minor cuts and bruises, but Marcus had taken the full impact. He was unconscious with a severe head injury, and they needed to operate immediately. But here's the kicker. Legally, as his emergency contact and healthcare proxy, I was the only one who could give consent for his surgery. Not his wife of 6 hours. Not his parents who were driving frantically from 3 states away. Me. Jennifer lost it. Right there in the hospital hallway, she started screaming at me. Why is SHE making decisions about my husband? This is insane. I'm his wife. We just got married. She was sobbing and yelling at the same time, attracting stares from everyone in the waiting room. I felt like I was drowning. This was supposed to be the happiest day of Marcus's life, and instead I was standing in a hospital in a cocktail dress, being asked to make decisions about whether he lived or died. The doctor was patient but firm. They needed an answer now. Marcus's brain was swelling, and every minute they waited made his chances worse. What would he want? The doctor asked me quietly while Jennifer paced behind us, crying into her phone. And that's when it hit me. I actually knew the answer. 3 years earlier, when Marcus's father had died after being on life support for weeks, Marcus had made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, I wouldn't let him suffer like that. He'd been traumatized by watching his dad waste away in a hospital bed, kept alive by machines long after there was any hope of recovery. He'd want you to do everything possible to save him, I told the doctor, but he wouldn't want to be kept alive artificially if there was no chance of meaningful recovery. Jennifer whirled around. How do you know what he'd want? I'm his wife. I should be making this decision. But even as she said it, I could see the uncertainty in her eyes. The truth was becoming painfully clear. She didn't know what Marcus would want. They'd been together for 8 months, most of it spent planning this elaborate wedding, posting couple photos on Instagram, and playing house. But they'd never had the deep, late-night conversations about life and death, and what really mattered. I had. I remembered sitting with Marcus in his apartment 2 years ago when his dad was dying, watching him break down as he talked about medical ethics and quality of life, and what it means to really live versus just existing. I remembered him grabbing my hands and making me promise that I'd never let anyone keep him alive just for the sake of it. The surgery went on for hours. Marcus's parents arrived somewhere in the middle of it, confused and devastated, and initially angry that I was making decisions about their son. But as the night wore on and Jennifer continued to fall apart, something shifted. Marcus's mom, a quiet woman named Carol, sat down next to me in the waiting room. He chose you for a reason, she said softly. Marcus has always been careful about who he trusts. If he made you his emergency contact, it's because he knew you'd do right by him. That's when Jennifer revealed something that made everything even more complicated. I knew about the emergency contact thing, she admitted through her tears. He told me months ago, but I thought it was just for work stuff. I didn't think it meant you'd be making actual medical decisions. I thought it was just paperwork. As the hours dragged on, I learned more about Marcus and Jennifer's relationship than I'd ever wanted to know. They'd met at a company mixer and had this intense, passionate courtship that moved at lightning speed. He'd proposed after 6 months, and they'd planned the wedding in just 2 months because Jennifer wanted a fall ceremony and couldn't wait until next year. But as Jennifer sat there in her ruined wedding dress, surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be the best day of her life, she started to realize what I was beginning to understand too. She barely knew her husband at all. We never talked about stuff like this, she whispered. medical wishes, future plans, any of the serious stuff. We were too busy being in love and planning the perfect wedding. Meanwhile, I was sitting there remembering years of conversations with Marcus. I knew he was terrified of hospitals because of his father's death. I knew he'd rather live one good year than 10 years in a wheelchair. I knew he valued his independence above almost everything else. I knew these things because we talked about them during long dinners and late-night phone calls and quiet moments when people share their deepest fears. Jennifer knew his favorite restaurant and his coffee order, and the way he looked at her when she laughed. But she didn't know his soul. When Marcus finally woke up 3 days later, weak and disoriented but miraculously without permanent brain damage, the first thing he did was look for me. Jennifer was right there holding his hand, but his eyes found mine across the room. "Maya," he said hoarsely, "thank you." Jennifer's face crumpled. Right there in front of the doctors and nurses and his parents, she realized that her husband's first words weren't for her. They were for the woman who'd made the decisions that saved his life. That's when everything came pouring out. Jennifer started crying again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the shocked grief of an accident victim. It was the deep, ugly crying of someone who'd just realized their entire life was built on a foundation of sand. "He trusts you more than me," she sobbed. "His own wife, and he trusts you more than me." Marcus tried to sit up, wincing from the pain in his head. "Jen, it's not about trust. It's about knowing someone deeply enough to make impossible decisions." But Jennifer was spiraling. "I don't know you at all, do I? I don't know what you'd want if you were dying. I don't know your deepest fears or your biggest dreams or any of the things that actually matter. I know your Instagram password and your favorite sports team and how you like your eggs, but I don't know you." The worst part was watching Marcus realize she was right. He looked at his wife, his bride of 3 days, and saw clearly for the first time that they'd built their entire relationship on surface-level attraction and shared social media aesthetics. They'd never done the hard work of actually getting to know each other's hearts. "Why did you marry me?" Jennifer asked, and the question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because I was lonely. Because you were beautiful and fun and made me feel like I was living in a movie. Because I thought that was enough." "But it's not enough, is it?" Jennifer said, and for the first time since I'd known her, she sounded wise instead of just pretty. The next few weeks were brutal to watch. Jennifer tried to play the devoted wife role for a while, posting hospital selfies with captions about in sickness and in health. But as Marcus's recovery stretched on and the reality of months of physical therapy and doctor's appointments set in, her true priorities became clear. She started complaining about the smell of the hospital. She was frustrated that their honeymoon had to be canceled. She kept asking when things would get back to normal, as if a traumatic brain injury was just an inconvenience that would resolve itself quickly. The final straw came when I caught her in the hospital bathroom, filming a TikTok video about being a young wife dealing with trauma, while Marcus was literally down the hall struggling to remember how to walk without assistance. That's when I realized Jennifer wasn't evil. She was just young and shallow and completely unprepared for real life. She'd fallen in love with the idea of being Marcus's wife, not with actually being his partner through the messy, difficult parts of life. Marcus saw it too. During one of our quiet conversations while Jennifer was off getting air, he admitted what we both knew was true. "I married the wrong person," he said simply. "I married someone I was attracted to instead of someone I could build a life with." 6 months later, Jennifer filed for an annulment. She claimed the marriage had been entered into under duress, which was legally questionable but emotionally accurate. She'd married a fantasy version of Marcus, not the real man who could be hurt and needed care, and had deep friendships with women who weren't her. The last time I saw Jennifer was at the annulment hearing. She'd already moved on, dating some guy she'd met at her gym. posting photos of their weekend trips and fancy dinners. She looked happy in that surface-level way she'd always been happy, beautiful and carefree and completely unburdened by the messy realities of loving someone deeply. Marcus recovered fully, but it took time. Months of physical therapy, cognitive exercises, learning to trust his body again. I helped him through a lot of it, not because I had to anymore. He'd updated his emergency contact information to include his parents and eventually a new girlfriend who actually knew him. But because that's what friends do. We talked a lot during his recovery about trust and intimacy, and what it really means to know someone. He felt guilty about putting me in that impossible position, but I came to understand that he'd chosen me not to burden me, but because he trusted me to make the decisions his heart would make if it could speak. "You saved my life twice," he told me once. Once by making the medical decisions, and once by showing me what real friendship looks like. Jennifer's karma played out exactly as you'd expect. Her rebound relationship lasted about 4 months before she got bored and moved on to someone else. She kept trying to monetize her young widow story on social media until people pointed out that she wasn't actually a widow and had chosen to leave. Last I heard, she was engaged again to some finance guy who looks good in Instagram photos. Marcus is happy now, genuinely happy in a way he never was with Jennifer. He's dating someone named Sarah who's a nurse. Someone who understands that life is fragile and precious and that real love shows up during the hard times, not just the photogenic ones. As for me, I learned something valuable about the weight of being trusted with someone's life. Being an emergency contact isn't just about paperwork. It's about being the person someone trusts to honor their values when they can't speak for themselves. It's about knowing someone well enough to make impossible decisions with love instead of fear. I also learned to be more careful about the commitments I make, even the ones that seem small. When you agree to be someone's emergency contact, you're agreeing to potentially hold their life in your hands. That's not a responsibility to take lightly. So that's how I ended up making life or death decisions for someone else's husband on their wedding day. If this story taught you anything about the importance of choosing your emergency contacts wisely, smash that like button. Have you ever been in a situation where someone trusted you more than their own family? Drop your stories in the comments below. And if you want more wild true stories like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell because my life is apparently more dramatic than I thought. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.